In this world, bloodline, talent, and caution are everything when it comes to becoming a mage, and unfortunately for Lloyd, no amount of caution could ever make up for his complete lack of talent. His instructor makes this painfully clear, declaring that magic will never be part of Lloyd's life and coldly using magic to end it, scorching his body beyond recognition. Yet even in death, Lloyd's love for magic never fades. He calls the spell that killed him magnificent, admires the noble only magic that struck him down, and even gives it a name, Bella. His only regret is not having learned more magic, even if he could never use it properly. With that thought, Lloyd dies, only to wake up moments later surrounded by giants. Panicked, he tries to defend himself with a fireball spell, only to realize his hands are tiny. To everyone's shock, including his own, the spell actually works. Outside, a massive celebration erupts as the birth of the seventh prince of the Kingdom of Salem is announced. Lloyd has been reincarnated as royalty, and the destruction caused by a baby's fireball leaves the entire kingdom stunned. Years pass, and Lloyd grows into a peculiar child who constantly hides from his maids. Though invited to participate in an assault, he is far too busy escaping from caretakers to care. The knights decide he isn't worth worrying about, as his young age places him far from the line of succession. Still, one knight warns the other that Lloyd is anything but ordinary. He spoke immediately after birth, reads spellbooks instead of picture books, and even refused milk like a stubborn knight in training. Some even whisper that he may be the reincarnation of William Bardet, the legendary father of sorcery. Lloyd himself dismisses the idea, remembering that he was just a commoner in his past life and having no idea why fate favored him this time. Titles and glory mean nothing to him, his only goal is the same as before, to explore the limitless wonders of magic. Given a vast royal library, Lloyd dives into study, though his education is constantly interrupted by Seela, the maid assigned to train him. She insists that swordsmanship matters even if he'll never inherit the throne. Their daily spars turn intense, with Lloyd secretly using magic to track her movements and copy her techniques. Though he lacks her strength and reach, he experiments constantly, combining enhancement and levitation spells to balance the fight. Even when defeated, Lloyd learns something new, most importantly, that he can cast multiple spells at once, a feat beyond most court mages. Despite all this, Lloyd's true excitement lies elsewhere. After being warned about a forbidden library sealed beneath the castle, a place once ravaged by a demon named Grimoire, Lloyd pretends to be afraid while secretly thrilled. That night, he sneaks in using wind magic to bend light around himself, effortlessly bypassing guards and a barrier created by 10 powerful mages. Inside the forbidden library, he meets Grimoire, who tempts him with illusions of gold and false promises of peace. Lloyd sees through every trick, calmly explaining that this kingdom is his place of study and he won't allow it to be destroyed. When Grimoire offers to teach him ancient, lost magic, Lloyd finally agrees to break the seal. But the demon betrays him instantly, unleashing an overwhelming spell meant to kill him on the spot. To Grimoire's disbelief, Lloyd survives, and not only that, he is ecstatic. He praises the beauty of the magic, asks for more, and calmly analyzes every attack thrown at him. Even as the demon rages, Lloyd lowers his defenses to feel the spell directly, enduring unimaginable pain simply to understand it. His obsession with magic only grows stronger, and his fearless admiration drives Grimoire into complete madness. As Lloyd stands there smiling, utterly entranced by the very power meant to destroy him, he decides to push things even further by casting an even more devastating spell. This time, the Grimoire finally gets serious and reveals a special technique. He synchronizes 2 enchantments at once, something considered impossible for normal beings. As a demon with 2 mouths, however, he can pull it off. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he unleashes his ultimate attack with overwhelming force. Yet Lloyd doesn't move an inch. He simply stands there, calmly analyzing the spell as it crashes against his barrier. When the Grimoire realizes that even his strongest technique failed to leave a scratch, panic sets in. Lloyd, on the other hand, is impressed, admiring how much effort and dedication it must have taken for the demon to reach that level of power. Desperate, the Grimoire tries to flee, only to discover another barrier blocking his escape. He assumes Lloyd said it to trap him, but Lloyd explains that he once made a mistake long ago and has since chosen to be far more cautious about everything. By the time the grimoire prepares to attack again, Lloyd has already finished analyzing all his moves. Lloyd then activates a powerful spell that forces the grimoire to defend himself with everything he has. A massive fire attack erupts from Lloyd, leaving the demon speechless as he wonders where such an absurd amount of mana could even come from. Before he can process it, the attack completely incinerates him, an almost ironic end for a demon, burned by flames. Lloyd casually notes that he didn't even block the attack, the grimoire simply failed to withstand it. To the demon's shock, Lloyd then restores the entire room, which had been utterly destroyed. Awestruck, the grimoire admits he has never encountered a mage this powerful and begins calling the boy Master Lloyd. Lloyd is surprised to discover that the demon survived at all, which only sparks his curiosity further. He wants to know just how much more the grimoire can endure. Terrified of endless experimentation and pain, the grimoire immediately pledges loyalty, offering to become Lloyd's familiar. Lloyd accepts and asks him to transform into a small animal to avoid drawing attention. The demon chooses the cutest form he can manage, secretly hoping the harmless appearance will lower Lloyd's guard so he can strike later. Lloyd tells the transformed grimoire, now called Grim, to climb into his pocket. Grim believes this is the perfect chance to get close enough to control Lloyd's mind, but the moment he enters the boy's cloak, he is overwhelmed by Lloyd's dense, terrifying mana. He quickly realizes that controlling even a single finger of this monster is impossible. Trembling in fear, Grim can barely comprehend whether Lloyd is even human. When Lloyd asks if he's cold, Grim nervously replies and decides to remain obedient for now. Lloyd happily runs off to read books, completely unconcerned. Sometime later, as Lloyd walks through the mansion preparing for his day, Grim warns him that someone is approaching. Lloyd tells him to hide, and soon a noble named Albert enters. Albert performs a flawless magical demonstration, impressing everyone present. He is the second prince of the Kingdom of Salem, known for excelling at everything and widely believed to be the future king. Albert is allowed access to advanced training areas and often invites Lloyd along, especially since Lloyd can't freely use much magic inside the castle. Lloyd enjoys these trips, though he has no desire to impress anyone or compete for the throne. Showing his true power would only drag him into royal politics, which he hates. When it's Lloyd's turn to demonstrate, he casually curves his fireballs so they barely graze the targets. The spectators are disappointed, but Grim knows that such precision actually requires far more skill than simply hitting them directly. Lloyd doesn't care about their reactions, he's already thinking about how to improve further. Albert, however, senses something unusual and later reveals that Lloyd hit every target perfectly in the same way on purpose. Calling him a genius, Albert predicts that Lloyd could one day become a grand sage and hopes they can remain allies, or at least brothers on good terms. With Albert gone, Lloyd excitedly begins experimenting again, this time with the double chant technique Grim used earlier. Grim insists it's impossible for humans, as only demons can manage multiple mouths. To Grim's horror, Lloyd finds a workaround by incorporating the demon into his own body through spell stacking. Lloyd explains that by compressing enchantments and chanting dozens, sometimes hundreds, of spells per line, he can drastically shorten casting time. Grim is driven nearly insane watching Lloyd do something even demons struggle with. When Lloyd discovers he can now speak with two mouths, Grim panics, fearing simultaneous advanced spells, and his fear proves justified. Lloyd casts both a Hellfire Ball and a Water Lightning spell at the same time, flooding the area with absurd levels of mana. Realizing the ground can't handle it, Lloyd fires the spells into the sky, creating a colossal explosion visible even from the castle. Servants dismiss Lloyd as an unskilled child, but Albert calls them blind, pointing out that Lloyd's control is far beyond normal comprehension. Moments later, the sky darkens unnaturally, and Grim trembles in fear, realizing Lloyd briefly tore a hole in the atmosphere. Lloyd panics, desperately hoping no one notices, but thankfully, everything returns to normal. Even so, the event leaves behind one undeniable truth: Lloyd is not just talented. He is utterly insane in the most terrifying, brilliant way possible, and Grim, still shaken to his core, once again wonders just who or what Lloyd really is. But Lloyd himself has already moved on, as if his mind is constantly jumping ahead. Now he's fascinated by a new story he's read, one about high-ranking adventurers who explore extremely dangerous dungeons and return with rare treasures and powerful magical artifacts. To Lloyd, that sounds like pure excitement, so he decides he wants to visit one of those dungeons himself. Grimm immediately warns him that the entire kingdom would panic if anyone found out the seventh prince had disappeared. Lloyd calmly responds that he's already thought of that. Grimm is confused when Lloyd pulls out an acorn, but that confusion turns into shock when Lloyd uses it to create a flawless wooden replica of himself. This replica isn't just a statue, it has nerves and internal structures, allowing it to move on its own in simple ways. It's absurdly overpowered, yet Lloyd admits it still isn't enough. If he were confident this alone would work, he would have done it long ago. The real issue, as always, is Sela. A brief flashback shows just how obsessed she is with Lloyd, to the point that she noticed when he grew a fraction of a millimeter taller. Lloyd knows this dummy won't fool her for long, but of course, he already has another plan. He steps outside, leaving Grimm in control of the replica while maintaining communication through his hand. The maids fawn over how handsome Lloyd looks, while Grimm can only think that his master is completely unhinged. Lloyd has transferred Grimm's soul into the replica and integrated the demon's empty body into his own hand. With everything entrusted to Grimm, Lloyd prepares to leave. Grimm admires how realistic the replica is, then suddenly realizes Lloyd isn't around to restrain him anymore. A few mischievous thoughts cross his mind until Lloyd suddenly tells him that he genuinely enjoys having Grimm as his familiar. The words hit Grimm harder than expected, and he nearly tears up. When Lloyd asks what's wrong, Grimm brushes it off and urges him to hurry up and clear the dungeon. Lloyd then realizes he has no idea where a dungeon actually is. Grimm points out that someone nearby seems to be under attack, but that assumption quickly falls apart when the victim turns around and completely obliterates her pursuers. The girl displays overwhelming combat ability, and Grimm notes that she must be a martial artist. Lloyd immediately recognizes the breathing technique she's using, one that channels an energy known as ki through the body to grant incredible physical strength. Somehow, the girl senses their presence. Though Lloyd doesn't seem concerned, he's far more interested in learning about her technique. That changes when Grimm warns him that she might recognize him as the seventh prince. Lloyd's hesitation makes the girl suspicious, and as she starts approaching, both boys panic. At the last second, Lloyd alters his appearance and introduces himself as Robert, using a transformation spell that allows him to copy someone he's seen before. By combining that spell with dual enchantment, he merges features from his brother Albert to create a completely new look. The girl introduces herself as Tao. Lloyd worries she might be suspicious, but in reality, Tao is internally freaking out because she thinks Robert is incredibly attractive. Tao has spent her entire 18 years training non-stop. She ran away from her dojo and became an adventurer in search of romance, but things never worked out since most men she met preferred fragile spellcasters over strong fighters. Now, she believes she's finally found her chance and immediately decides that Robert will be her boyfriend. Lloyd, noticing she seems busy, chooses not to invite her to explore the dungeon with him, but Tao tags along anyway. Inside the dungeon, she's eager to show off her combat skills, while Lloyd is completely distracted by some shiny stones on the ground. Tao is surprised by how much Lloyd understands about her breathing technique and explains that mastering ki begins and ends with breath control. Proper breathing fills the body with ki, allowing superhuman strength, but it takes years just to sense it in the first place. She jokingly tells Robert he should focus on discovering the ki of her heart instead. Lloyd ignores the cheesy remark and shocks her by instantly copying the breathing technique. He casually explains that he just mimicked it, but Tao warns him that without proper conditioning, it will feel like his lungs are on fire. Naturally, Lloyd keeps going anyway. To his surprise, he actually starts feeling the energy inside his body and becomes excited, realizing he can apply this sensation to spellcasting. Tao decides to guide him further and tells him not to stop the breathing technique until they leave the dungeon. Meanwhile, back at the palace, Grim reflects that Lloyd truly is insane. He has a life of luxury and safety, yet none of it matters to him, only magic does. Things remain peaceful for Grim until Sela suddenly appears, instantly terrifying him again. Back in the dungeon, Tao unleashes a burst of ki and effortlessly defeats a dungeon boss. They're rewarded with a treasure chest, though Tao explains that underdeveloped dungeons rarely contain impressive loot. As they examine it, Tao realizes that Robert has already learned her breathing technique in an absurdly short amount of time. At that moment, she decides she's hit the jackpot because if she can turn this into a student-teacher romance, she might just have found the perfect partner. Her caretaker would have no choice but to accept him as her fiancé. Tao moves to open the chest, but Lloyd has to jump in and save her when it turns out to be a lethal trap. A grotesque trash monster bursts out of the chest, and Lloyd immediately wonders if this thing is actually the dungeon's true boss. Tao plays it off like the monster is nothing serious and tells Robert to leave the dungeon while she handles it herself, but he insists on staying to watch her fight. In reality, the situation is far worse than she's letting on. Realizing this, Tao apologizes to Robert and forcibly throws him out of the dungeon. She figures that breaking a few of his bones is still better than letting him die to the trash monster. Tao narrowly dodges the monster's attacks, but the truth is that even high-rank adventurers wouldn't stand a chance against something like this. She's not arrogant enough to believe she can defeat it, so she focuses on buying as much time as possible for Robert to escape. Meanwhile, Lloyd is still flying through the air after being launched by Tao. He feels disappointed, knowing there was still so much he wanted to learn from her. He manages to stop himself midair and hesitates, wondering if he should go back. Confused about why Tao threw him out in the first place, he asks Grim for advice. Grim stays silent at first, but when he finally speaks, he urgently tells Lloyd to return home immediately to save him. Back in the dungeon, the fight is going badly for Tao. She realizes her strength is fading and that her life may be slipping away. When she tries to retreat, she's stunned to hear the trash monster speak. It explains that it devours the souls of adventurers to steal their knowledge and abilities. After evaluating her, it decides Tao isn't worth consuming, claiming her Kai techniques are nothing more than low-level magic. However, it shows great interest in Lloyd, impressed by how quickly he reacted to the trap. Tao snaps back, insisting that the trash monster and Robert are nothing alike. Most people dismiss Kai techniques as useless, but Robert said he was impressed by them. The monster doesn't care, and Tao attacks again. A barrier protects the trash monster, yet Tao keeps striking relentlessly. She shouts that she's been training her Kai techniques since she was 5 years old, venting all her pent-up frustration. She angrily declares that after spending her entire life training, she never even had the chance to find a boyfriend. After unleashing countless blows, she finishes with one final, devastating strike, yelling that all her built-up frustration is exactly why no one should ever mess with her. She burns through so much Kai that she can't move at all afterward. Completely exhausted, things take a turn for the worse when the trash monster reveals it's still alive. Tao had released a full-powered Kai explosion to shatter its barrier, but the monster mocks her, saying the attack was pathetic. It claims her full strength is weaker than the magic in just one of its fingers and goes on to insult her, saying she wasted her entire life on meaningless training. It then casts a spell, preparing to crush her with a massive magical fragment, only to freeze in shock when Lloyd suddenly reappears and saves her. Lloyd calmly says he's taking over now, but he doesn't have much time, so he'll end the fight quickly. Tao has no idea what's happening and demands to know why Robert is back, but she can tell from his expression that he's completely serious. In an instant, Lloyd flies behind the trash monster, and Tao is stunned to see him using a breathing technique. The trash monster is surprised too, but not because of the breathing. Lloyd just cast an aerial class spell called Full Screens, which should be impossible to use without an incantation. The trash attacks, but it's shocked by the sheer durability of Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd, however, isn't focused on defeating the monster, he's concentrating on perfecting the fusion of Kai and mana, something he still hasn't fully mastered. Remembering Tao's advice, he focuses. Lloyd draws in even more air, accelerating his movement spell. The trash assumes he's trying to run away and launches another attack. But Lloyd is only breathing deeper. His own barrier starts to interfere with his breathing, so he deliberately shuts it off. The trash believes the barrier has been destroyed and thinks it finally has the advantage, though it hesitates to go for the finishing blow. Lloyd effortlessly dodges every attack. Tao realizes in shock that the trash didn't break the barrier at all. Robert disabled it himself so he could breathe deeper and unleash an even stronger Kai technique. As he continues dodging, his Kai begins radiating outward. Everyone watching is stunned as Lloyd taps into this new power, yet he's still not satisfied. He makes a small adjustment, then bursts into manic laughter as he unleashes a relentless barrage of attacks. He even hopes the monster doesn't give up yet. He's having far too much fun and still wants to experiment more. The trash monster is utterly confused. It was convinced Lloyd was just a mage, yet here he is, matching advanced sorcery with basic Kai techniques, without using a single incantation. The trash begins taking serious damage as Lloyd's refined attacks overwhelm it. When the monster tries to defend itself with its barrier again, it's useless. Lloyd's strike pierces straight through the barrier and the monster's body. Tao watches in complete disbelief as Lloyd excitedly declares that he's finally discovered something new. After the battle ends, she's left a bit disappointed. After all that effort, their reward is just an old dagger. Lloyd examines it and realizes it's infused with mana, but Tao still thinks it's worthless and tells him to keep it. At that moment, the dungeon starts collapsing. Tao explains that dungeons normally crumble once their boss is defeated. Lloyd compares it to how lizards shed their tails to survive. He realizes that dungeons lie dormant underground until a magical item is left behind, absorbing it and slowly rebuilding themselves. They also collect items from fallen adventurers, and when they sense destruction, they offer one of those items as a bribe to ensure their survival. Lloyd finds the concept fascinating, but there's no time to linger. He quickly pulls a chest out of the ground, and together with Tao, escapes just seconds before the dungeon collapses completely. Lloyd watches in awe as the dungeon seals itself off, destined to gather power underground until it becomes active again. Tao admits that Robert is an incredible mage, but she still doesn't understand why he chose to use a Kai technique at the end. Curious, she asks if he did it to defend her after the monster mocked her. To her disappointment and slight heartbreak, Lloyd admits he only did it because he wanted to have fun with that. Lloyd prepares to leave, remembering he has to return home. Tao is left deep in thought. She realizes the Kai technique Lloyd used was so advanced that she couldn't even replicate it herself. Determined, she vows to train harder than ever and become stronger. As they part ways, Lloyd tells her he plans to train a lot too. Tao decides she wants to become someone who can catch Lloyd's attention again, but then she realizes she has no way to contact him. It's already too late. Lloyd is long gone and has already returned home. There, he's shocked to find Grim in tears. Sela had taken the fake Lloyd out for training, but she was horrified by how weak he was and swore she would make him strong again. Grim is crying because he didn't even get to experience that brutal training himself. He's also disappointed to learn that Lloyd was gone all this time, only to come back with a sword that looks cheap and unimpressive. Lloyd, however, insists the blade is actually a valuable treasure. He places it in hot water and scrapes away the surface, revealing that it was treated with mana essence. He explains that mana essence is incredibly difficult to obtain and that enchantment spells themselves are extremely complex. Mana essence is used to inscribe magical formulas onto weapons, greatly enhancing their power. But if an enchantment fails, both the essence and the weapon are completely destroyed. Because mana essence is so rare, Lloyd decides to analyze the one he found. Hoping to recreate it, he casts a purification spell and identifies its components: oil, silver, and a substance called amatite. Amatite is a powder extracted from monster cores, making it an exceptionally rare material. Fortunately, they can obtain some amatite from the dungeon chest, meaning all that's left is the oil and silver. Lloyd's father gives him a few silver coins, curious about what his son plans to buy. Not long after, Lloyd and Grim head to their hideout, where they melt down the silver. Lloyd then proposes a wager with Selah. If he manages to hit her, she has to give him some oil. He tries to outsmart her with a bit of magic and prepares to win, but at the last moment, he loses track of her. Selah suddenly appears behind him and wins the bet. Even so, she kindly hands over the oil, saying she's glad he's not as weak as he used to be. Grimm, who had been secretly watching, feels deeply offended. He realizes she was calling him weak and fumes, thinking that even without magic, she shouldn't have been able to beat him. He silently wonders what kind of maid she really is. Selah watches Lloyd with admiration. Even though he's only 10 years old, he's already impressive with both sword and magic. She imagines that one day he could become a great knight commander. Lloyd simply thanks her for the oil, leaving her wondering what kind of dish he plans to cook with it. Back at the hideout, Lloyd and Grimm add the oil to the mixture and finally succeed in recreating the mana essence. Lloyd then asks Albert to lend him some weapons to test his enhancement magic. Albert finds Lloyd's obsession with magic adorable and asks his soldiers which of them wants their little prince to enchant their weapon. They all eagerly step forward, but only because Albert practically orders them to. In reality, none of them are excited. Enchantments almost never succeed, and Lloyd is only 10 years old. They're convinced he'll just end up breaking every weapon. Grimm overhears their doubts and becomes furious. He decides to step in and angrily declares that they'll enchant those weapons and make them invincible. Lloyd writes out an enchantment called Boost Power and starts working like a mad scientist. Grimm is stunned when Lloyd applies 3 layers of the spell. The kid is completely unhinged, cramming magical formulas into every tiny space he can find. Unsurprisingly, the sword breaks. The steel simply can't handle that many enchantments. Lloyd admits that enchanting is difficult, but Grimm encourages him to keep going. After countless failures, Lloyd finally gets the hang of it. He returns to Albert with 50 out of the 120 swords he was given and apologizes for breaking 70 of them. In truth, he successfully enchanted 80, but destroyed some after trying to stack even more spells onto them. Albert is stunned. Even top-tier enchanters only achieve a success rate of around 10%. The soldiers don't believe Lloyd actually enchanted the weapons. They assume he gave up after ruining most of them and returned the rest untouched. Playing along, they casually remark that the swords look sharper until one of them slices his own sheath clean in half by accident. No one knows how to react. Grimm, small and seething, feels completely vindicated. Albert is impressed by the sword's power, and Lloyd explains that he wanted to see how they'd perform in real combat. The timing couldn't be better, as Albert announces they're heading out on a monster hunt. Soon after, Lloyd joins him, bringing Grimm along. They arrive in a forest near a lake, where the monster is said to be lurking. Lloyd is thrilled. He rarely gets to leave the castle, and now he can finally see his enchanted swords in action. Albert notes that Selah never leaves Lloyd's side, and she thanks him for allowing her to come. Albert teases that her feelings for Lloyd might be a bit excessive, but she shuts him down with a sharp threat. Suddenly, they're surrounded by a pack of kobolds. The soldiers treat it as a warm-up before facing the real threat. Lloyd pretends to be scared, but Grimm knows better. Lloyd sensed them long before they appeared. One of the core techniques Selah taught him was spectral detection. By combining it with Kai breathing, Lloyd constantly monitors his surroundings. Grimm realizes that Lloyd always has this detection active alongside a barrier, meaning surprising him is virtually impossible. The boy is getting more terrifying by the day. The fight begins, and everyone is shocked by how sharp the enchanted swords are. They don't just cut through monsters, they slice through steel armor like it's paper. The soldiers react like kids holding knives for the first time. Lloyd concludes that his enchantments were a success, and Albert agrees, calling him a prodigy. Selah also agrees, standing atop a pile of defeated monsters until Lloyd points out that he didn't even enchant her sword. At that moment, a kobold lunges at Lloyd, but Tal appears out of nowhere and takes it down. Lloyd almost calls her Roberto but stops himself just in time. Tall notices that Lloyd is using Kai breathing techniques and says she came because she thought she sensed Roberto. Looking closer, she realizes Lloyd strongly resembles him. Sela finishes off another monster, praises Tall for the assist, but warns her not to get too close to Prince Lloyd. Tall responds that she sensed a far stronger monster approaching and cautions them not to underestimate advanced Kai techniques. The tension between the two rises until Albert steps in, calming things down and inviting Tall to join him instead. That night, Tall is shocked to learn that Albert is actually a prince. He resembles Roberto a little, but not nearly as much as Lloyd does. Lloyd hides nearby and realizes that Tall's mastery of Kai has made her extremely sensitive to his presence. His constant spectral detection must be how she found him. He decides to retreat to his tent, only to discover Sela inside, changing clothes. Lloyd tells her he doesn't need protection, but Sela disagrees, clearly unhappy that this new girl is getting close to him. Just then, Tall walks in and interrupts. Sela calls her an idiot. Tall fires back, calling Sela a perverted maid. As the two start arguing, Lloyd quietly takes the chance to slip away. Albert jokingly calls Lloyd a lady killer, remarking on how much Sela has changed since she began looking after him. Sela admits that Lloyd has become surprisingly mature for his age, but Albert warns him that relationships with women are complicated matters. Before the conversation can go further, the girls notice the soldiers watching them far too closely and casually knock them all out. Lloyd understands Albert's warning loud and clear. Tall then explains that she was hired to cleanse an ancient shrine, and Sela bluntly tells her to hurry up and finish the job. The two almost start arguing again, but Albert steps in, acknowledging that Tall's ability to sense danger makes her extremely valuable. He asks her to stand watch during the night, but Tall calmly replies that it won't be necessary. The monster is already there. A wolf bear suddenly appears, and Sela immediately orders Lloyd to stay behind her. The monster charges forward with terrifying speed, far faster than its massive body should allow. Lloyd tries to speak with Grim, but the little demon is lying on the ground, strangely motionless, as if he recognizes the shrine. Tall manages to rescue several soldiers, but it quickly becomes clear that the monster is incredibly powerful. Albert finally steps forward, drawing his sword. He apologizes to the beast and declares that the local people have suffered long enough. Chanting a spell as he swings his blade, Albert unleashes a devastating strike that obliterates the wolf bear in a single blow. Everyone is stunned. Even Albert realizes that his attack shouldn't have been that strong and concludes it was only possible because of the enchantment Lloyd placed on his sword. As Lloyd reflects on how he may have added a little extra power to Albert's blade, Grim suddenly panics. He reveals that a sealed demon resides within the shrine. To everyone's horror, the wolf bear's body begins moving again. More monsters emerge from the shadows, and a furious voice echoes from within the beast. The voice introduces itself as the demon Pazuzu, enraged that one of his servants was harmed. He swears vengeance and sends his minions to attack. Although the soldiers cut them down easily, the monsters regenerate instantly. Tall saves Albert and quickly deduces that the demon is controlling all the minions. Grim explains that Pazuzu uses mana transmutation to manipulate monsters like puppets, channeling his mana through them to grant rapid regeneration. He warns everyone that Pazuzu is no ordinary demon and that the situation is about to become extremely dangerous. Lloyd, however, seems unfazed. Instead of panicking, he asks Grim to teach him mana transmutation. Sela demands that Tall do something, but Tall fires back that Sela herself isn't backing down either. Grim warns Lloyd that this is the worst possible moment to start learning something new, as people are fighting for their lives, but Lloyd remains confident and insists on learning anyway. Watching from within the wolf bear, Pazuzu mocks the group, claiming they only survive thanks to their weapons. He taunts Lloyd, calling him a coward who ran away like a frightened child. The insults infuriate Sela, and Pazuzu deliberately pushes further, sneering that it must be exhausting for her to care for such a worthless waste of flesh. That crosses the line. Sela's demeanor changes completely, terrifying even Tall. She softly apologizes to Lloyd, who doesn't seem bothered at all, still focused on learning.
Pazuzu continues insulting her, but Sela fires back, mocking the stench of his minions and declaring that his breath alone is polluting the air around Lloyd.
Calmly drawing her sword, she announces that she will take him down. Pazuzu boasts that they can never win as long as he supplies mana to his monsters, since demons never run out of it. Expecting her to break, he attacks, but Sela effortlessly cuts off all of the demon's legs. She warns him to abandon the wolf-bear body, or his defeat will only come faster. The group realizes that the minions have slowed down and stopped regenerating properly because Pazuzu is now focusing all his mana on healing himself. Albert immediately orders Sela to press the attack. Meanwhile, Grimm finishes explaining mana transmutation to Lloyd, demonstrating how mana can be shaped, colored, and even scented. Grimm is utterly shocked when Lloyd casually reveals that he has already shaped his mana into a flower and added a fragrance to it perfectly. The two even pause to admire the scent. Back in the battle, Pazuzu grows increasingly frantic as Sela overwhelms him with flawless technique. He can't comprehend how someone so powerful could be just a maid. Borrowing a soldier's sword, enchanted by Lloyd, Sela admires its balance, which only deepens Pazuzu's obsession with Lloyd. Declaring he wants to dissect the boy, the demon launches a lightning-fast attack and traps Sela, mocking her for falling into his snare. His arrogance vanishes when he realizes she's still alive. In a single clean motion, Sela cleaves the wolf bear's body in half, announcing it as her family's twin blade art. She follows up with a technique called diving sparrow, severing the monster's head. Pazuzu tries to insult her again, sneering that she's nothing more than a maid, but Sela proves otherwise by unleashing another sword technique that completely obliterates the body and exposes the demon inside. Everyone is left speechless. Lloyd watches in awe, realizing this is Sela at her full strength, and begins instinctively molding his mana after her movements. Disgusted by the demon's fixation on Lloyd, Sela declares that the only thing he will ever touch is her blade. She tells Pazuzu to make peace, only to be shocked when he actually begins to act. While the others finish off the remaining minions, Albert senses it isn't over yet. Suddenly, everyone collapses as a suffocating miasma spreads across the battlefield. Even Sela is affected. Enraged after spending over a century building his puppets, Pazuzu blames Sela for destroying everything and launches a final attack, blasting her into a nearby river. Albert desperately tries to move to her aid, but his strength is nearly gone. Pazuzu reveals that the foul aura spreading across the battlefield is the miasma of domination, a power that allows him to control anyone who inhales it. Silford dryly remarks that this explains why it smells so terrible, which only irritates Pazuzu further. His next attack is aimed directly at Sela, but Tao intercepts it at the last moment. Sela insists she is fine and orders Tao to run, yet her condition clearly betrays her words. Badly injured and exhausted, she collapses and loses consciousness. Pazuzu admits he is impressed, noting that Sela inhaled more miasma than anyone else and still managed to challenge him head-on, defeating his monsters in under 30 seconds. What fascinates Pazuzu even more is Tao. Unlike the others, she remains free from his control. Tao forces him back, but he eventually restrains her. Pazuzu deduces that she must be resisting his miasma through a breathing technique, and he is correct. However, when her breathing is disrupted, her resistance weakens. He mockingly suggests she stay behind because she wanted to become his slave, but Tao angrily shoves him away and declares she is waiting for a handsome man. This time, she is serious. She unleashes a powerful attack, her emotions flaring as she prepares an even greater move. While trying to stabilize her breathing, disaster strikes. One of Pazuzu's regenerated puppets attacks her from behind. As the demon releases his miasma at full power, confident that she will finally fall, Tao realizes something important. Even through the overwhelming corruption, she can still feel him. The handsome man she was waiting for is close. With renewed hope, she declares that the one destined to destroy Pazuzu is already on his way. Her strength fades, however, and she is ultimately devoured by one of the puppet monsters. Turning his attention back to Sela, Pazuzu decides she would make a perfect addition to his army. Though controlling her would be costly, her power is worth it. He prepares to flood her with even more miasma, and Lloyd suddenly understands the truth. This is how Pazuzu controlled the werewolves, killing their parents and breaking the minds of the pups through domination. Pazuzu proudly declares that no one can challenge his rule. Lloyd calmly responds that he is awful. The demon freezes in shock when he realizes Lloyd can move freely within the miasma. He demands an explanation, but Lloyd admits he does not know how he is resisting it, which only makes the situation more terrifying. Pazuzu is shocked yet again when he realizes Grimm is a demon. He cannot comprehend why a demon would protect a human and even mocks Grimm for being handsome, calling him a disgrace to demonkind. Grimm restrains himself, admitting that the insults only make him want to watch Pazuzu get torn apart. When Pazuzu sends his monstrous minions to attack, Lloyd grows excited, eager to test his newly learned mana transmutation. Grimm warns him that controlling so many monsters will require an enormous amount of mana, unaware that Lloyd possesses what is essentially an infinite supply. Lloyd carefully calculates the exact output needed, astonishing Grimm with his precision. Envisioning something gentle and warm, Lloyd releases his mana, instantly stripping Pazuzu of his control over the werewolves. Grimm calls the former puppets cowards, while Lloyd notes that even Grimm himself might have fallen under the influence of such mana. Lloyd forces one of the werewolves to spit out a towel, relieved to see she is unharmed. Pazuzu watches in disbelief as Lloyd converts his mana into a vast field of blooming flowers, effortlessly erasing the demon's domination. When Pazuzu tries to regain control, Grimm declares it is already too late. The werewolves have remembered the truth that Pazuzu murdered their parents. Enraged, they attack him in coordinated formations, impressing Lloyd with their teamwork, something no puppet could ever replicate. Still defiant, Pazuzu lashes out, punishing the werewolves and showing no remorse for exterminating their families. He insults them as inferior beings and declares this the fate of anyone who challenges him. He boasts that no spell Lloyd uses will work, since demons cannot be eliminated by magic. Grimm confirms that this has always been believed to be true. Pazuzu then announces that he will reveal his true power, now that he no longer wastes mana on minions. Lloyd barely listens, instead becoming deeply absorbed in the mystery of why magic cannot erase demons. The idea excites him, fueling his curiosity even further. Suddenly, Pazuzu feels an overwhelming, abyssal pressure. Lloyd's mana erupts, vast and terrifying. Grimm explains that this is why Pazuzu's miasma never affected Lloyd. His power was never even close. Lloyd has spent years suppressing his mana to avoid causing chaos, and doing so has been exhausting. Compared to Lloyd, neither Grimm nor Pazuzu's mana even comes close. Realizing Lloyd does not see this as a battle but as an experiment, Pazuzu panics. Lloyd begins placing barriers around him, treating the demon like a test subject trapped in a cage. Pazuzu tries to flee, and Grimm admits he would do the same. Lloyd, however, is exhilarated, finally able to release his power. Pazuzu desperately runs, dodging barrier after barrier as Lloyd casually casts spell after spell. Grimm watches in disbelief, wondering how many spells Lloyd can cast simultaneously. Lloyd replies that he can manage around 20, and then increases that number by synchronizing with Grimm. Pazuzu struggles desperately, even complimenting himself for surviving so long, until Lloyd suddenly activates a spatial spell called Dimensional Includer. Calmly, Lloyd tells him that he now belongs to him. Pazuzu begs for mercy, but Lloyd refuses, reminding him of the atrocities he committed against the werewolves, including grotesque experiments. When threats fail, Pazuzu offers Lloyd a high position in his future empire. When that fails too, he finally admits the truth. He has never faced magic this powerful and genuinely fears death. Lloyd no longer pays attention to Pazuzu and instead begins chanting an absolutely insane enchantment. The demon continues begging for his life, but it is already too late. The spell is in motion. Lloyd casually estimates that he is casting nearly 240 spells per minute and becomes mesmerized by the sheer beauty of the magical phenomenon unfolding before him. He decides to continue the experiment for another 30 minutes, but not even 5 minutes pass before he begins to wonder whether the demon might already be dead. Grimm explains that sorcery affects demons much like unbearable sounds and blinding lights affect humans.
However, the overwhelming amount of magic Lloyd poured into Pazuzu causes devastating consequences.
The demon's body begins to collapse, and in his final moments, he reflects bitterly on the century he spent creating monsters and plotting world domination only for everything to be undone by a boy who merely wanted to experiment. Lloyd's complete disinterest in his suffering deepens Pazuzu's humiliation. Suddenly, Lloyd notices that everyone around him is starting to wake up. Realizing he cannot allow anyone to witness the full extent of his power, he immediately runs off to fabricate an excuse. Grimm, left behind, tells Pazuzu that people do not follow leaders who constantly complain about their hardships. Instead, they are drawn to those who act freely and joyfully, just as Lloyd always does. That, Grimm explains, is why people naturally gather around him. Remembering to maintain his own tough persona, Grimm claims he is only following Lloyd to gather power for revenge someday. Strangely satisfied, Pazuzu entrusts Grimm with his ambition of ruling the world, which Grimm accepts, pleased to feel a part of his own mana restored. Lloyd later claims that a mysterious figure named Roberto appeared and defeated the demon, saving everyone.
Tao hears this and quietly wonders where Roberto has gone.
The city celebrates Prince Albert's victorious return, praising his heroism, while Lloyd is admired but still considered overshadowed by Albert, something that annoys Sela greatly. When the king asks about the adventurers who assisted Albert, Albert reveals something shocking: Lloyd was the true backbone of the hunt.
Without Lloyd's enchanted weapons, they would not have survived.
Albert boldly proposes that Lloyd be considered for royal succession, stunning everyone present. Though the king worries this would create rivalry, Albert insists the throne should belong to whoever is most worthy, regardless of age. When the king directly asks Lloyd if he will stand beside his brothers in the race for the throne, Lloyd calmly refuses without hesitation. Outside the castle, Lloyd meets a werewolf who followed them home, running around with childlike excitement. Lloyd finds him adorable and names him Shiro, much to Grimm's jealousy.
Sela quickly hides Grimm in Shiro's fur when she notices how fond the werewolf is of Lloyd. Lloyd begins teaching Shiro simple commands, noting that more complex instructions are difficult. This leads him to consider monster taming techniques, prompting a visit to the tower in Princess Ali's garden. Ali, the sixth princess and a devoted monster lover, overwhelms Lloyd with affection the moment she sees him, causing him to faint. Though Sela doubts Ali's sanity, Lloyd gives her a chance and is stunned when she reveals the presence of a hidden high-level Fenrir named Lyro, who had gone completely undetected. Even more shocking is the fact that Ali issued complex commands without any visible gestures. Excited beyond measure, Lloyd asks Ali to teach him how to communicate with Shiro. She warns him it will not be easy, but Lloyd eagerly accepts the challenge. To everyone's surprise, Ali reveals that the true key to speaking with monsters is not magic or technique, but love. As if proving her words, every creature in the tower rushes to embrace her, leaving Lloyd more fascinated than ever by the many unexplored wonders of the world. Ares thinks it's useless to try learning from Alice since she's simply a prodigy. But Alice insists that Shiro can learn. She gives another demonstration, but this time the animals get a bit overexcited with everyone. Sela is shocked to see that Lloyd seems to be showing interest in love. She imagines Lloyd asking her to teach him more about it. In reality, Lloyd realizes he had been trying to give commands to Shiro, but his sister had never issued any orders to her animals. Instead, she was simply sharing her will with them. When she spoke to them, Lloyd noticed that the mana wasn't coming from her hands, but was flowing directly from her head to theirs. This means she is subconsciously connecting to the animals through mana, giving them a direct vision of what she desires. Lloyd concludes that instead of giving commands, he'll try to share a mental image of his will. So, he does exactly that, and everyone is amazed when Shiro performs the trick. Lloyd had been trying to teach. He celebrates alongside Shiro, and Ares concludes that he truly must be very talented. The technique he used is exactly how monster tamers share their will. Sulfa is also impressed, though slightly disappointed that it wasn't the way she had imagined. Aries is upset, saying it should have been love. But sharing one's will isn't something that complicated. Lloyd explains that love indeed plays a fundamental role in the technique, and he is absolutely thrilled to have finally discovered how to connect with animals. Sela suggests that he should dedicate himself to sword training as well, and coincidentally Albert appears wanting to talk with Lloyd. They argue over who gets to keep Lloyd's attention, and Albert mentions that he wants to introduce him to someone, that someone is Lloyd's older brother. The fourth prince, Dion. Dion heard that Lloyd enchanted Albert's sword, but he's skeptical and wants to see it with his own eyes. Albert explains that Dion studied blacksmithing in stereo, which is why he's quite interested in enchantment. Without wasting time, Dion prepares a test for Lloyd's abilities. And when he begins the process, Dion doubts that Lloyd can pull it off. Enchantments are already complicated, and what Lloyd supposedly did to Albert's sword seems impossible, far beyond what they understand. So Dion considers teaching Lloyd a lesson for supposedly lying. But his jaw drops when Lloyd finishes the enchantment. Albert understands Dion's reaction, since even a beginner can tell that Lloyd's technique is completely unique. Dion is left speechless, wondering what kind of magical engraving Lloyd just created. The sword now has reinforced durability, increased flexibility, self-cleaning, and even self-repair. Dion's skepticism turns to excitement as he realizes that Lloyd might be the key to achieving his greatest dream, creating the best enchanted sword in the world. He wants to engrave the spell into the weapon during the steel forging process, allowing for the use of more advanced spells than usual. This would result in a super weapon that could only be made through the collaboration of an enchanter and a blacksmith. Dion reveals that he always loved sorcery as a child, but never had the talent for it. However, enchanted swords are amazing because anyone can use them. His goal is to turn the country into a place where everyone can wield magic through swords. Lloyd, on the other hand, doesn't care much about those goals. He's more interested in the production process, so he agrees to help Dion. Dion explains that he wants the sword to release fire when swung. And for that, Lloyd recommends an enchantment called Pyrolens. The problem is that the formula requires 14 components, and an enchanted sword can only hold a maximum of 5. Lloyd's solution is to compress the formula into just 2 components. Lloyd completes the compression and prepares to apply it to the steel that Dion is currently forging. However, both are surprised to see that the steel broke just from the application. Lloyd tries to find solutions, but the steel keeps breaking. He feels bad for wasting so much mana essence without understanding what is going wrong. At that moment, Grimm notices something about the mana essence and Lloyd's pressure. Dion encourages Lloyd to keep trying, saying he managed to obtain a large amount of mana essence at a low price. Lloyd then purifies the mana essence and realizes it contains almost no ametite. Enchanting the sword requires a much higher concentration of ametite, but this material is made from monster cores and is quite rare. Dion has none, so Lloyd considers sneaking out to hunt some monsters in a dungeon again. At that moment, Sulfa suggests taking them to a dungeon. Lloyd points out that as a prince, he does not have permission to go hunting, but Sulfa explains that the king changed his mind after the recent monster hunt incident. Now he believes Lloyd must broaden his horizons and learn more about the world. To begin this journey, they go to the Adventurers Guild so Lloyd can register as one. The receptionist, Katerina, asks Lloyd to fill out some paperwork before touching a crystal orb that will measure his strength and determine his adventurer rank. Lloyd is already familiar with these crystal orbs, having used one when he led the Magic Academy in his previous life. However, these are different circumstances. Lloyd is certain the crystal orb would explode if he used his full power, which would attract a lot of attention. To prevent that, Lloyd focuses on suppressing his mana even more than usual, shrinking it to the size of a flea. When he finally touches the crystal orb, he is mocked for receiving a general E rank. However, Katerina is not laughing. On the contrary, she is shocked to see that Lloyd's magic ranking is comparable to that of an experienced sorcerer.
Lloyd feels disappointed because he thought he had only used 1% of his mana.
Katarina then declares that Lloyd is the most promising new adventurer since the one known as Silverblade.
The other adventurers become furious upon hearing her make such comparison. The legendary Silverblade had crossed countless dungeons like a true demon, but then disappeared suddenly. They believe a legend like her should never be mentioned in the same context as a mere beginner adventurer since there are no A-rank adventurers available.
Seela explains they want a dungeon mission. However, those require at least one B-rank adventurer to participate. Seela then decides to register again, but one of the adventurers insists she should go with him.
After Sulfa puts him in his place, Katarina reveals that he just messed with the wrong person.
Sulfa is actually the legendary adventurer Silverblade.
Katarina explains that re-registering involves a 2-rank demotion, which would place her at C rank, so it would not work.
At that moment, Tao appears and offers to help. However, Seela barely recognizes her and says they are already heading home. Tao insists and explains that she has been traveling from dungeon to dungeon in search of Robert.
This journey has made her strong enough to be classified as a rank. Now, Tao offers her help in exchange for a date with Albert.
Katarina recommends a dungeon mission while Sulfur retrieves Lloyd's cloak. Lloyd is surprised to learn about her legendary past.
She explains that it all happened when she was very young. What she remembers most is her failed attempt to defeat a deadly group of enemies. The trio continues on their path and soon finds a treasure chest. Meanwhile, back at the forge, Albert speaks with Diane.
Diane explains that Lloyd will need a few more days to bring the precision materials.
However, Albert seems somewhat concerned about the time it is taking, which makes Diane realize that a war is nearing its end. Even so, he asks Albert to wait a little longer. Once Lloyd returns, they will be able to mass produce those enchanted swords for battlefield use. Albert says they should not be concerned with fighting for now, as his true goal in gathering them all is to help them get along again. As brothers. He hopes that one day their weapons will help protect the kingdom, and he encourages Diane to keep trying.
At that moment, Diane says they should hurry because Lloyd has already returned with the monster core. While working on the sword, Diane realizes that Lloyd is an incredible boy.
Albert, however, already knew that and believes there is nothing Lloyd cannot do.
This idea is reinforced even more when Diane tests the enchanted sword.
They created a blade capable of massive destruction. Lloyd realizes he may have gone a bit overboard in forging the sword and decides he'll need to modify it in the future. Thus, the sword forged by the brothers is born and it is given the name the Lord.
That night, Lloyd takes a rest.
He notices Albert has been extremely busy lately and wonders if something major is about to happen. At that moment, he feels something strange coming from the garden.
A very unusual sensation, almost like a tear in space.
His perception is incredibly sharp, yet even he can't quite figure it out. Lloyd begins to wonder what it could be, and we see a mysterious figure outside. The girl outside is visibly shocked when Lloyd suddenly appears before her.
He remains incredibly calm while she tries to flee only to discover she's trapped.
Lloyd tells her he only wants to talk despite the fact that she's an intruder. The girl then uses a strange power and quickly apologizes, saying she never meant to use it on a child. Lloyd instantly identifies it as poison, but is shocked when his purification magic fails to work. Her attack causes intense pain, and she apologizes again, revealing that her poison cannot be purified. Lloyd, who believed purification magic could neutralize all known poisons, realizes that what she's using must be an unknown toxin.
What's even more astonishing is that she's transmuting the nature of her poison with mana. Some rare individuals are born with a special type of mana.
Those with especially dangerous powers are feared and known as the Blizzard.
The girl confirms she's one of them, a poison blizzard, known as the Venomous Moth Queen.
Lloyd is stunned as she breaks through his barrier. He realizes Rain must have weakened him with her poison.
Rain assures him he'll be fine since he didn't ingest much of it, though he'll definitely feel the pain in the coming days. Rain takes her leave, and Lloyd is surprised she was able to completely hide her presence. Grim arrives, telling Lloyd it's no time to be impressed. Lloyd says he's fine. His body is constantly healing. Grim then asks why he didn't stop the girl, and Lloyd explains he let her go to track her back to her hideout. Grim has no clue who they are. So Lloyd reveals that Selah told him about the Assassin's Guild. He's certain Rain is one of them. The guild consists of 6 assassins, each with a bounty on their head. But what excites Lloyd most is that each of them possesses unique abilities. Lloyd tracks where she went, and Grim can't believe he's able to trace someone who's supposed to be undetectable. Lloyd explains that her presence is like a tear in space. He follows Rain just as Selah arrives late to the scene. Elsewhere, Rain is confronted for not eliminating her target. However, she shares that she gathered useful intel. They're mass-producing enchanted swords, clearly preparing for war. But this only angers one of the assassins, who tells her to stop acting like she's their leader, Jade, since he's been gone for a long time. Rain argues that Jade isn't coming back, but they're quickly told to stop arguing. They're being watched. Lloyd then reveals himself, surprising Rain since he's still poisoned. The assassins had heard rumors that Lloyd pretends to be unremarkable, but is actually incredibly powerful. Regardless, none of that matters. Lloyd found them, so he can't be allowed to leave. Our bold young hero hears this and decides to lower his barrier, prompting Grim to wonder how insane Lloyd must be. Lloyd says he's facing enemies with unique powers, and it would be a shame if he couldn't experience them for himself. He uses his tracking skill to imitate Tao's fighting technique and tells the assassins to come at him. He fights the first challenger, who is surprised to see Lloyd knows martial arts. This guy is impressively flexible and reveals he can twist his entire body to fit through the smallest spaces. He's known as Babylon the Giant Rat, also called the Nowhere. Lloyd is fascinated as the man's body is truly unique, but there's no time to admire it since someone else approaches Lloyd from behind. The man says his words sink deep, and Lloyd is stunned as his body suddenly becomes unbearably heavy. His name is Crow, the Shadow Raptor, and the mana in his words marks him as a cursed blizzard. Next, the brute attacks, but it's Crow who ends up shocked as Lloyd uses sheer strength to break through the curse. Then Lloyd is caught in a trap and the large man introduces himself as Gallo the Spider. He's known as the Webbreaker, able to transmute the mana around his body into a sticky substance. Lloyd manages to break free and marvels at how unique his opponent's abilities are. Then he is suddenly attacked by a girl, but Lloyd easily dodges her strikes. At that moment, the wild girl stabs herself in the leg and somehow Lloyd feels the pain in his own leg. The girl then reveals her name, Phalia, the antenna of Dory, and she explains she has the ability to share pain with anyone she sees. She is known as the Painraker. Lloyd can only wonder how exactly her ability works. With the introductions out of the way, the Elia is thrilled to believe she has finally taught Lloyd what fear is. However, she is shocked when Lloyd calmly replies that he feels no fear. What's even more surprising is that Lloyd instantly heals both stab wounds despite them having pierced all the way through. The boy truly shows how crazy he is when he starts wondering what would happen to Talia if he healed himself and whether that healing might affect her too. He then asks if any damage he deals to her would also be reflected back onto him. Lloyd casts enhancement magic to create blades out of some torn fabric and then uses his tracking ability to mimic Selah's fighting style. Our eccentric little warrior now tells the assassins to get ready because he wants to test how well they can defend themselves. The assassins realize that he looks just like the swordsman who traumatized them in the past and they're terrified. Lloyd launches his assault, and the assassins are shocked to see he's highly skilled, not only with blades, but also in martial art. What makes this even harder to believe is that they had only heard of Lloyd as a magical prodigy. Lloyd nearly slices Babylon in half, but is impressed when the giant rat relaxes his body at the moment of impact to reduce the damage.
The other assassins try to team up against Lloyd, but end up hurting each other in the process. Lloyd strikes Babylon again with such speed that Babylon can't even say the word stop to force Lloyd to halt. Lloyd then uses a double sparrow strike and all Babylon manages to say is ball. Lloyd wonders if he would have gone bald had Babylon said that word, but he's just glad he didn't find out. Gallo wants revenge, but his web sticks to everything, putting Talia in an awkward situation. Lloyd then attacks Talia, but she reminds him that hurting her means hurting himself, too. She assumes he'll back off and is stunned when Lloyd instead grows even more excited to feel what it's like. He sends both of them flying, causing immense damage, but he's happy it worked. The brute then catches Lloyd in his webs, but Lloyd escapes and lands a massive punch charged with thunder energy. By now, Lloyd is bleeding from his mouth, which only makes him seem even crazier when he asks Rain to show him her poison again. Gallo warns him not to push her. She can't control it well, and if she uses it, everyone might be affected. Lloyd notices that none of them seem to have full control over their powers. And Gaul confirms this. He explains that if they had learned to control them, maybe they wouldn't have been forced into becoming outlaws. In a fit of rage, Gal attacks Lloyd. But Lloyd easily restrains him. Rain tries to rescue Gaul while he cries out in pain, but Lloyd also stops her. She's determined to make Lloyd pay for what he's done to Gaul until Gaul reveals he's actually fine. In fact, he's better than fine for some reason. He's now in control. Everyone is shocked when Lloyd reveals he engraved a spell directly onto Gaul's back, allowing him to control his power. Lloyd admits he's never cast a spell onto a human body before, but he's glad it worked. Gaul is overwhelmed as his curse finally ends, but Lloyd tells him he's more than just a cursed brute now because he can control his mana freely. The others watch in awe as Lloyd tells them it's their turn. He engraves the spell onto them, too, and they feel relieved to finally gain control over their mana. Crow is the next to break into tears. It's been so long since he could even speak properly. Everyone starts celebrating, but Rain pretends not to care. She claims she's crying for a different reason, but it's clear she's happy she can now wear whatever she wants. Her poison won't destroy her clothes anymore. Lloyd is thrilled because everything seems to be working out. But Rain doesn't like the idea of Lloyd becoming one of them. The others insist they owe him everything and urge her to prepare a proper welcome party for him. Rain tries to point out that Lloyd mass-produced war weapons and stealthily infiltrated an assassin's hideout. She thinks he's way too insane to join them, but Grimm explains that Lloyd only did all of that for fun. Lloyd wants to see what they can do with their powers now that they can finally control them. But Gal thinks they owe him an explanation first. Lloyd says it's fine, but they insist on telling the full story. Lloyd isn't exactly interested in the history of the Assassin's Guild until Gaul mentions their leader. Their leader was the Ghost Blizzard, a man with the power to teleport. He was known as Jade the Shadow Wolf. A flashback shows Jade returning to the hideout after his teleportation ability randomly sent him somewhere against his will. It's a terrible curse, and Jade's curse might be the worst of all. On that day, Jade decided they would become the Assassin's Guild. The plan was to take on the dark jobs the Adventurers Guild couldn't or wouldn't handle. We then see that they used to leave the emblem of the Assassin's Guild a coin at the scene of their missions so that people would know their existence was contributing to global peace. The idea was that one day they wouldn't need to hide anymore and could live freely. Gallo keeps telling the story, but Lloyd only wants to hear more about teleportation powers. Gallo explains that just when things seemed hopeful, they heard rumors that Lloyd was preparing for war. And that's when something happened to Jade. Everyone was stunned when an envelope appeared out of nowhere. Sometime later, Sela enters the assassin's hideout looking for Lloyd, but he's not there. She can still smell his scent and realizes a note has been left behind. The note is from Lloyd. He explains that he went to visit the Lord of the Lordest along with the Assassin's Guild. Albert trembles with fear as he reads the letter, wondering how this could have happened. He worries that the Lordist and the assassins might be working together and that they may have taken Lloyd hostage. The Lord tries to calm him down, and Albert agrees that going to war with the Lord isn't the answer. War should be the absolute last resort, so Albert swears he'll find a peaceful resolution until the very end. They both fear the worst and immediately forget everything they just said.
The two instantly agree. War is the only option. Elsewhere, we see that Lloyd is not the hostage. In fact, he's the one leading the charge. It's then revealed that the mysterious letter was actually from Jade. He explained that he had overthrown the rulers of Lordist who were preparing for war, and now he is the new Lord. Jade had finally achieved his goal, and that's why he invited the other members of the Assassin's Guild to the Lord's mansion to celebrate. He wanted everyone to live together again. And the assassins were overjoyed because Jade was fulfilling the promise he had made. Gallo thanked Lloyd for helping them and swore they would repay him someday. However, Rain had a request for Lloyd. She asked if he could come with her to imprint the spell on her, too. Lloyd didn't mind helping her, but he revealed something suspicious. He pointed out that the letter had been teleported with precision to the exact spot where they were. That level of relocation magic is one of the most complex topics in magical theory, and no one has ever been able to master it fully. It's not the kind of thing that just happens by chance. The others quickly realize this means Jade lied about not being able to control his power. Now they begin to wonder, can they really trust him? Could this all be a trap? Rain tries to stay positive, hoping that maybe Jade simply learned to control his power. Either way, Lloyd says he doesn't need to go along with them, disappointing Rain. However, she's shocked when Lloyd suddenly announces he will go because he's interested in studying the teleportation ability. Rain starts to doubt Jade as well, but Lloyd reassures her. If there's any trouble, he'll handle it. Lloyd tells everyone to follow him, and Gaul is moved, saying that Lloyd's kindness knows no bounds. After covering some distance, the group needs to stop and rest. The journey is too exhausting for the assassins. Lloyd points out they've only been flying for 10 minutes. But since the assassins aren't used to it, they're already worn out. Lloyd's flight pace stresses the group so much that Babylon ends up bending so far backward, he gets completely stuck. Lloyd agrees to take a break and Rain immediately runs off to look for food for everyone. She grew up in the forest and Babylon notices she's clearly trying to show off in front of Lloyd. He reveals that when Rain was very young, her venom accidentally killed her own parents. Left alone in the forest, it was Jade who rescued her. We then see the moment Jade brought Rain to his hideout for the first time. The others were shocked by her wild behavior. She even growled at him, but Jade assured them she would be okay. He had promised he could teach her how to get along with others. And Rain seemed to understand. Jade wrapped Rain in cloth so her poison wouldn't harm anyone, but the others were still uneasy. Cheerfully, Jade simply commented that she smelled like flowers and ironically ended up poisoned by her. Everyone was convinced that Rain couldn't live near others, but Jade vowed to live with her no matter what. As Jade held Rain above his head, he asked the others to help raise her. Philia agreed to give her some clothes, and Galal said he'd become her teacher. Even Babylon joined in, trying to develop a type of food that could neutralize Rain's poison. Touched by her companion's kindness, Rain cried. Jade had already developed a spell to counter her poison and implemented it into her new clothes so she could officially join the group. Rain was moved to tears, and since then, Jade had been like an older brother to her. Lloyd admires the spell Jade inscribed into her clothing and says he'd like to meet him one day. Grimm is stunned to hear Lloyd showing genuine interest in another human being, which proves just how powerful Jade must really be. Sometime later, Rain shows everyone the stew she made, though it doesn't look very appetizing. The group jokes that Crow could use his sweaty speeches to make it taste better, but Rain stops him with a venomous punch and demands they try it first. The others try to warn her that Lloyd being a prince probably won't enjoy it, but they're all shocked when Lloyd starts eating it without hesitation.
He reveals that in his past life, he was broke and had eaten far worse things. To him, Rain's stew tastes great. Seeing this, the others start to warm up to Lloyd and follow his lead, tasting the stew. In truth, Rain had never been able to cook before. Her poison always contaminated the food. But now she's overjoyed and hopes Jade can finally taste her cooking one day. Another flashback shows Jade telling everyone that the guild was reconsidering the bounties on their heads. The group cheered as this meant they might one day live normal lives. However, Jade said he had something to confess. He told them he had always claimed to be a random outcast, but in reality, he was the third son of the Lord of Lordest. The territory of Lordest is ruled by his family, a brutal lineage obsessed with war. Like a pack of bloodthirsty beasts, Jade explained that he had spent years searching for a way to stop the war, which was why he created the group of assassins. He admitted he had manipulated them and apologized. Jade thought he was making a big dramatic revelation, but was surprised when everyone already knew. The group reacted calmly. Rain, however, was visibly shocked. The others explained that each of them had a painful past, but what really mattered was that Jade had given them hope for a better future. They were excited to help him eliminate his wicked family, but Jade insisted he had to do it alone. He explained that if the guild found out they'd helped him, the bounties on their heads would skyrocket. He couldn't allow that, so he decided to handle it himself. He declared that his body was cursed and his family was a curse upon the world. His entire life had been marked by tragedy. Still, Jade said he felt blessed to have met his friends. He cried as he confessed that he wanted to live with them all forever, but he knew he couldn't since his family could launch a war at any moment. He couldn't just ignore that. Jade's only request was that they keep the guild running, even if he never returned from Lordest. However, if he succeeded, he would become Lord of Lordest and turn the territory into a place where the blizzard could live in peace. More importantly, that would mean they could all live together again. Back in the present, Lloyd falls asleep after the meal. The assassins find it funny how easily he can sleep anywhere, but Grimm points out that Lloyd is always surrounded by an incredibly powerful barrier. The group starts to worry that Lloyd might be under the influence of his own family, so they decide to explore the mansion first. Still, they don't want to wake him up, so they plan to leave him outside. The assassins suggest Grimm stay behind to guard him, but he says Lloyd is practically invincible, even while asleep. Grimm's bigger concern is that if something happens to the assassins, Lloyd might scold him, so he decides to go with them. They arrive and find what appears to be a perfectly normal party. No signs of aggression in sight. Grimm suggests that they return later with Lloyd, but no one thinks that's a great idea, as they want to introduce him to Jade. Gallo agrees and remembers that Jade had mentioned being interested in the seventh prince, and at that moment they are approached by a stranger who announces their arrival to everyone. The assassins feel somewhat out of place since they never learned proper etiquette. Grimm decides to go look for Lloyd, but Ren becomes nervous at the thought of seeing Jade and asks him to stay. Then Jade appears. All the assassins become deeply emotional. He is wearing his old clothes and they all notice he used his teleportation ability to chain. Jade explains that he has just learned to control his power and everyone is relieved to realize he hadn't lied to them. Grimm encourages Ren to speak to Jade and everyone is moved when she fails to find the right words to say. Jade tells her he feels the same and Grimm sees this as the perfect moment to go find Lloyd. However, just before he can leave, Jade speaks up and orders everyone to bow. Shockingly, all the guests at the party are transformed into monsters, and the assassins are forced to fall to their knees. They are horrified to realize this resembles Crow's cursed speech ability, but it is far more powerful. Jade declares that his plan has succeeded and ignores Ren's pleas for an explanation. Jade had promised to hand over some bleeders to the monsters, and this malicious figure even forgets Ren's name. At that moment, Grimm launches an attack against Jade and orders the assassins to escape. He considers telling them to bring Lloyd, but realizes the situation is so severe that it might be better to tell Lloyd to flee as well. Grim uncovers the truth behind what is happening.
But before he can say anything, Jade hurls him away with a single kick. He mocks the idea of a mere demon interfering and calls Grim a fool.
Deep in the forest, Grim crashes near Lloyd, completely horrified by what he just witnessed. He now understands what Jade is plotting and calls the assassins wretched. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Ren begs Jade to explain what is going on, and the monsters mock her for being so naive. At that moment, demons emerge from the monsters' bodies, and Jade reveals he brought them from the underworld. But then the truth is exposed. This is not Jade. His real name is Geysarm, and he came from the underworld to this region because he desperately wanted something. And what he desired was Jade's body, specifically his teleportation ability. Ren is horrified when Geysarm reveals that Jade is dead because he took full control of Jade's body. To make things worse, Geysarm explains that it took him months to destroy Jade's mind. He torments Ren by saying that Jade screamed in agony as he emptied out his heart. Ren becomes furious, but Geysarm silences her without effort. He continues torturing them while explaining that Jade had begged him not to harm his friends. Jade deeply cared for them, and thinking of them was the only thing that helped him resist Geysarm's control for as long as he did. As Guy's control over Jade's body grew stronger, he began to learn about the Bleeders. Guys realized that their bodies would be perfect for his demon army. And so he tricked the assassins into coming as well. Jade knew this and decided to take his own life, believing that doing so would also eliminate Guys. The demon allowed him to go through with it just to make him suffer. But in the final moment, he healed the body. Now he mocks Jade for having wasted his resolve. As the demons around him laugh at his pain, Ren demands they be quiet, but Geysarm continues. He explains that Jade tried to end his life in many different ways afterward, reliving hell over and over again, but it only wore down his mind faster until eventually he simply ceased to exist. Ren can't take it anymore, but Guys doesn't care. He even crushes the gift Jade had once given him. The demons are eager to take possession of the assassins' bodies, but Guys warns them to be cautious. He says their abilities are dangerous, and then they all laugh when he mentions that Ren ended her own parents' lives with poison. The other assassins become enraged knowing how much pain that caused her. And now this monster is using Jade's voice to mock her. They all desperately want to attack Geysarm, but their bodies simply won't move. Just before Guys allows the demons to begin choosing their hosts, he notices a mark on Ren's body that wasn't present in Jade's memories. Geysarm uses his cursed speech to try and force Ren to reveal who altered her condition, but he grows frustrated when she resists. Ren manages to fight back by biting her own lip until it bleeds. And Guys realizes she's doing this to protect her companions. Clever and resilient just as he feared. He forces her to have a vision with Jade. She says she's able to control her poison thanks to a spell someone placed on her. Guys doesn't quite know what to make of this, so he uses his cursed speech on her again, causing excruciating pain. He commands her to hand over her friends, demanding to know who cast the spell on her, and she screams in agony. At that moment, a light shines in the night sky. All the assassins are stunned when a barrier envelopes them. Guys tries to figure out what's happening, but it's already too late. A massive attack strikes the mansion, leaving behind a gigantic crater and shocking everyone. Guys is devastated to realize it was Lloyd who saved them. Lloyd then asks what Guys was so desperate to find out, revealing that he was the one who placed the spell. The demons begin to tremble with fear as they stare at the enormous hole in the ground. Ren sobs as she explains what happened to Jade. Lloyd gently calms her while healing her wounds and says that Grim had already told him everything. It's clear now that Guys is after him. Lloyd tells the assassins to escape. He'll handle things from here. Ren is heartbroken at the idea of fleeing, but Lloyd emphasizes that demons are swarming everywhere. Even worse, Guys is a monster beyond his comprehension. All the demons search the crater in a panic, afraid that Guys might no longer be alive.
Then Guys suddenly reappears, launching one of the monsters into a pool of lava.
He terrifies the remaining demons, demanding to know what they're doing standing around. He reminds them that assassins are masters of stealth.
If they lose track of them now, they may never be able to find them again. Guys orders them to chase the assassins, warning them that if they fail, they'll be killed.
The demons rush after the assassins, but Lloyd steps forward and declares that he won't let anyone leave. He unleashes another unbelievably powerful attack.
The blast lights up the entire area, and the assassins realize this is Lloyd's doing.
The demons call him a maniac and Guys uses his cursed speech to command die.
A powerful attack is launched directly at Lloyd.
Lloyd is shocked to see the attack pass through his barrier. This crazy kid even considers letting the attack hit him just to see what would happen. Grim yells at him to die, and Lloyd finally complies.
The attack ends up hitting one of the demons instead. Lloyd analyzes the spell and discovers that it causes instant death by triggering cardiac arrest in its target.
Grim pleads for Lloyd to flee and warns him that Guys can use mana to attack without casting spells just like Crow's cursed speech, but far more efficient. The fact that the attack is formed directly from mana is what allows it to bypass Lloyd's magical barrier. Lloyd could usually dominate someone's mana if they were like Pazuzu, but Guys' attack might actually be strong enough to pierce his heart.
Grim explains the demons are ranked by class from 10 to 1.
Guys' minions are class 10 demons, which is why magic still works on them.
Pazuzu was class 8. Grim himself is class 3.
Lloyd guesses that Guys is class 1, but Grim reveals that it's much worse than that. Guys belongs to a terrifying tier known as the royalty of the underworld. Even elite class 1 demons wouldn't stand a chance against him. These beings are living calamities, disasters in physical form. On that scale, even Lloyd might be in danger this time. But Grim is shocked when Lloyd simply flies up to meet Guys head-on.
Guys says he knows Lloyd is the 7th prince thanks to Jade's memories.
He explains that Jade had wanted to meet Lloyd.
Lloyd is visibly upset that Guys ruined the chance. Guys complains that Lloyd ruined his celebration by punching a hole in the floor. Grim is terrified as he watches Lloyd clearly prepare to fight.
Lloyd says he doesn't like the way Guys is hunting down the assassin guild. Both of them say they just want to have some fun, but everyone knows this is about to turn into a deadly battle.
Grim makes one last desperate attempt to convince Lloyd to flee because the odds are overwhelmingly against him. However, Lloyd has already realized something important. He won't be able to destroy Guys as easily as he did the demons on the ground. Grim is stunned that Lloyd considered defeating them easy.
Even class 10 demons are extremely strong with a natural resistance to magic, but Guys is on a completely different level. High-pressure mana, which would feel like a crushing wave to most, is barely a ripple to him. Just then, Guys fires an attack at Lloyd, and Grim is astonished to see it nearly break through Lloyd's ultra-durable barrier. What's even more terrifying is that Guys is breaking through multiple barrier layers with just tiny fragments of his mana.
Intrigued by Lloyd's barrier, Guys summons even larger mana spears and prepares to test its limits. He launches the attack and Lloyd does everything he can to dodge it.
The spears cause massive damage everywhere, but Lloyd does his best to avoid getting hit. At that moment, Grim is shocked when Lloyd has to stop because Guys teleported right in front of him. Guys then kicks the barrier, and Grim is surprised he managed to break it with a normal kick. The demon then combines the spears to create a massive attack, but Lloyd is able to block it with one of his giant statues.
The assassins can't believe the insane fight they're witnessing, and the lesser demons notice their targets are right there.
They go after the assassins and Babylon runs to open the gate.
Ren worries about Lloyd and we see Grim crying in fear. Lloyd tells him to calm down because he needs something. Guys is surprised he managed to pressure Lloyd using his teleportation, but Lloyd points out that the teleportation isn't even his own.
He says it's Jade's power and Jade was never able to control it, but he can.
Humans seem incapable of using this ability without the help of a spell from Lloyd. However, Guise explains that for his species' natural masters of mana-controlling abilities is simple. He pies the blighted born with powers but without the wisdom to use them. Guise believes they should be happy to sacrifice themselves, as a blighted is only complete when they become a vessel for a demon. Guise plans to show him what true power is and wonders if Lloyd will defend, dodge, or run. At that moment, Lloyd is shockingly pierced in the chest by Guy's spear. Guise reveals Lloyd never had a choice. With no way to fight back, Guise sends several more spears that pierce Lloyd. Nearby, Gallo reminds the other assassins that Lloyd gave them the ability to control their powers. They can't fight, so Gallo begins to trap the demons attacking them. His webs like stone in seconds, but the demons claim that's more than enough time to kill a few human. However, Crow doesn't give them the chance and forces them to the ground. Ablon opens the gate so they can escape, but Gallo is shocked when the demons break free of his webs. They say the assassins can't escape, but Thalia positions all the demons within her line of sight to use her ability and attack them all at once. Talia thanks Lloyd for helping her control her power and asks her friends to stay out of her line of sight. She admits she doesn't have enough control to avoid hurting others, so she tells everyone to flee. Thalia intends to hold off the demons, but Rin points out she won't be able to escape after cutting her own leg. The demons realize Thalia can hurt them by injuring herself, but tell her not to get close. They'll just heal. But Talia strikes again. They realize her power is extremely dangerous. And Talia tells her friends to leave once more, promising she won't let the demons take her body. Ren refuses to leave her side, but Gallo pushes Aloe and Crow to safety and shuts the gate. Talia tells Gallo to leave too, but Gallo insists she won't be able to deal with all the demons alone. Thalia realizes how serious the situation is and is shocked that Gallo already knows what she's planning. She intends to take her own life, so her power will eliminate all the demons, and Gallo has decided to go down with her. The demons are stunned upon hearing her plan and try to stop her, but Gallo forces them back. Thalia prepares to end her life, but Ren begs her to stop. Ren knows Jade will never come back, but says that now they can control their powers, and they're much closer to living in the outside world. Even so, Thea knows what she must do and tells the demons not to underestimate what the guild is willing to do for one another. Ren then calls out to her friends, but it's too late. Thea went through with her plan. Back to Lloyd, Guise celebrates his victory. He mocks the blighted for dreaming of living in the open and only wishes they had entertained him a bit longer. Guise prepares to end everyone else's lives. Lloyd is stunned when his body dissolves. At that moment, the real Lloyd suddenly appears and Guise has to dodge his attack. Lloyd was using a decoy. Guise is pleased to see they're still just talking, but then he's surprised when Lloyd asks if they can take the fight elsewhere. Then we see Talia's sacrifice was stopped just in time when a rain of flaming arrows strikes the demons. No one has any idea what's happening. Albert crosses through the gate and reveals that he brought the battle with him. Ren feels relieved to see the second prince, and Albert commands his enchanted body of swords to move forward and save his brother. In a flashback, we see Sela undergoing some training. She strikes some straw dummies that had been compressed with magic to their limit, but she's worried about something. Whenever she uses her full strength, the sword ends up bending. At this rate, she won't be able to use her true power in battle because the swords won't be able to withstand it. That's why Sulfa holds back her real power. She knows she can't keep doing this if she wants to defeat demons like Pazuzu. Back in the present, the assassins are happy to receive help, but they're shocked when Albert declares they need to deal with the assassins first. Sela demands they tell her where Lloyd is and threatens to cut off one of their heads every minute they remain silent. They begin explaining that Lloyd is fighting the demon leader on their behalf.
But Babylon reminds Ron of what they once told Lloyd. He had been very cautious and told them that in the unlikely event someone from the castle showed up,
they shouldn't say anything about his strength or the existence of Grimm. Lloyd had explained that he didn't want to draw attention and only wanted to focus on studying magic.
The assassins don't know what to say, but time is running out and one of them is about to lose their head. They tell her Lloyd is fighting a loser, but that's not a good enough answer for Seela, and she prepares to send Ren's head flying. However, Prince Albert stops her, and the assassins feel confident that the kind-hearted Prince Albert will believe them, but they're stunned when Albert says he just doesn't want Seela to kill a child first. Albert is furious they left Lloyd's clothes behind as a threat, and Gallo only makes things worse with a terrible explanation of what actually happened.
At that moment, Ron interrupts and declares she'll accept any punishment.
However, the demons took someone important to her and that's why Lloyd is helping them. She pleads for them to believe her and her words seem to reach Seela.
At that moment, a demon tries to attack Ren, but Elsa shows up and saves her.
Elsa believes Ren, especially because her familiar would have gone berserk if it had sensed ill intentions. Fortunately, Albert decides to believe her, too.
He'll handle the demons.
And for that reason, he orders Seela to go find Lloyd.
However, Ren can't allow Seela to witness Lloyd's immense fighting ability.
So, she stops her by saying Lloyd is fighting a weak enemy and doesn't need help.
Seela is determined to go anyway. But everyone is shocked when something destroys the bridge. The demons are trying to surround them.
So, Albert orders everyone to retreat.
Seela is furious because she's very close to Lloyd.
It turns out that the one who destroyed the bridge was Lloyd himself.
Guys tries a sneak attack on him, but Lloyd dodges it effortlessly.
Grimm is so terrified that he has no idea what's going on, especially because there's something very strange about Lloyd's sword down below. Albert and his men begin attacking the demons, and Lloyd is pleased to see that they can handle them on their own. This means he can fully focus on his fight against Guys. Albert is a bit worried since the demons are resistant to magic, but at least their attacks are causing them some pain. Jean unleashes a powerful strike with his sword, and the demons realize he has significantly more firepower than the others. He's surprised to see the demons can still move after the attack and starts wondering what Albert is planning. Albert's troops will run out of mana if they keep using their enchanted swords at range. All the smoke from the attack is making it hard for their best close combat fighters to get through. At that moment, Albert notices that Sulfa has vanished. It turns out she mounted Shiro and ordered him to take her to Lloyd. The assassins say it would be impossible for Shiro to cross the river. So Seela thinks about tying a rope to him to help. But Shiro, who also really wants to see Lloyd, just leaps anyway and falls straight into the river. Seela thinks about jumping in too, but a demon in the shape of an egg appears and attacks her. Seela easily defends herself, impressing the demon, and the assassins are shocked because they can't even follow her movements. The demon then reveals himself to be a Class 8 demon and a practitioner of the demonic blade form. Seela is only now learning about demon classes and begins to wonder what level Pazuzu might be. Seela then tries to share some devastating news with the demon, but he believes that nothing she says will be enough to shock him. However, he is mistaken. She bluntly tells them that he has crap for brains. The demon desperately tries to explain that it's just a hat. While Albert realizes the citizens of Lord East have had their bodies taken over by demons, he tries to find a way to save them, but ends up being attacked by more demons. At that moment, he appears, offering to fight at his side. Babylon knows the assassins aren't admirable people and refuses to accept any excuses, but even so, they do not treat life lightly and will fight for what they believe is right. He explains there's no way to save the citizens of Lord East anymore because all that's left are demons wearing their bodies like empty suits. Albert thanks him for the advice and makes a decision. He prepares an attack and apologizes to the citizens for arriving too late. Albert finishes his chant and promises to set them free. His attack is incredibly powerful and enormous fireballs begin to rain down from the sky, burning all the demon. He then turns to his soldiers and declares that the time has come to win this battle. Nearby, Sulfat is locked in a fierce battle against a demon shaped like an egg. This opponent is shockingly powerful and everyone is stunned when he strikes Sela. He tries using attacks in the style of the demon blade, but Sulfa meets him blow for blow. Their fight causes massive destruction to the area, and both prepare their most powerful attacks. Their powers collide and the assassins can only wonder who this maid truly is. Sulfa and the demon take damage, but he makes sure to point out that this isn't a fair fight. Demons have the advantage since they can heal and overcome human limitations. Still, this fight makes him change his mind about something. He no longer wants a broken body. Now he wants Sela's body. Sela is shocked when he suddenly switches to his dominant hand, and she narrowly avoids being struck by the next blow. He's using a fencing style from Lloyd's, one that the body's original owner once used. The demon mocks the young man, claiming both his memories and body belong to him now. But he didn't expect Sela to counterattack, and she quickly gains the upper hand, taking him by surprise. The assassins cheer her on, and right after that, Shiro returns to the bridge, but the demon believes Shiro won't make any difference. That's when Sulfur reaches into Shiro's flesh and says she's going to put something to good use. She pulls out a sword. A quick flashback shows Lloyd handing her that sword. Lloyd and Diane crafted it together, but it doesn't have any flashy spells or inscriptions on it. It was made solely to be as durable as possible, able to endure all of Sela's full power. Lloyd was certain that with that sword, she'd be able to take down a demon. Demons are psychic entities and can't do much without a physical body. So, they either build artificial ones or possess human. If the body they're using is destroyed, the demon vanishes, too. When a body is under demon control, it becomes absurdly powerful, requiring an extremely strong attack to inflict any real damage. And even if it's wounded, it can still regenerate. That's why the only way to truly defeat a demon is with a fatal blow. Lloyd had always noticed that Sela was holding back when using a sword. He believed she couldn't fight at full power because she feared breaking her own weapon. Sela is deeply impressed that Lloyd noticed this and thanks him for the sword. She decides to name it Demon Bane to always remember not to let him down again. The demon mocks the name, convinced Sela's fate is sealed. Sela then reveals that the war was staged in order to trick Jade and force her to return to Luz. The assassins are furious when they realize the demons used Jade's fear of war against him. Ren is the angriest and without thinking twice, tries to attack the egg-shaped demon, but Sulfa effortlessly stops her, assuring them that she'll handle everything herself. She then assumes a fierce battle stance. The demon decides to use his secret technique demon blade form. They clash violently, but everyone is stunned when Sela cuts the demon clean in half. Meanwhile, an exhausted Jade watches the battle unfold and says that he finally managed to do something. Guise believes Jade is just trying to accept his own death, but Jade replies that he won't let him go unpunished. He declares that Guise will lose, but dies before revealing who will be his executioner. Guise then fully takes over Jade's body and begins scouring through his memories. He finds images of his friends, but something inside blocks him from seeing everything. Knowing Jade hated war, Guise decides the demons will start a massive conflict. Back in the present, Sela has defeated the egg demon and apologizes to the swordsman whose body was possessed. To her surprise, the assassins are crying and she comments that they don't even seem like real assassins. At that moment, the river begins to evaporate and thick steam takes over everything. Lloyd can't see anything and wonders if he made the wrong decision. Going back in time a little, we see Lloyd analyzing the battle against Guise. The enemy's spears can pierce through simple or even double barriers with ease. If Lloyd gets hit, it's all over. And to make matters worse, Guise can also use cursed incantations that ignore any kind of defense. Normally, those chants are slow, but he's combining them with incredibly fast spear attacks. The most dangerous move in the game is Shadow Wolf, which forces Lloyd to keep moving constantly. If he stops for even 1 second, Guise teleports a direct strike right to him. Lloyd realizes that no matter how powerful Guise is, he's just attacking nonstop without rest. So instead of staying on the defensive, he decides to go on the offensive, but he needs to act in under 2 seconds to avoid being hit by Shadow Wolf. He charges forward and Guise is impressed by his speed. Still, he doesn't worry. He's confident he can withstand the attack. However, he doesn't want to burn his clothes. So, he dodges, and that's exactly what Lloyd wanted. His strike hits the river, and steam spreads everywhere. Now, Lloyd is frustrated since Guise can teleport to any location. He needs to constantly use spectral detection to locate him. Grimm then warns him to keep moving, and Lloyd takes to the air. But then he has an idea. He realizes some time has passed and Guise hasn't used Shadow Wolf, which means the enemy can't see where he is. Lloyd recalls that Guise was afraid the assassins would escape because he wouldn't be able to track them afterward. In other words, Guise is completely dependent on his line of sight to teleport his attacks. And now with the steam blocking his vision, Lloyd can move undetected. Grimm gets worried when Lloyd stops moving, but notices Guise isn't looking either. Lloyd wants to get close enough to strike with his sword, but he knows that if he gets too close, Guise will notice. From Guy's perspective, he only needs to wait for Lloyd to move. And when that moment comes, Lloyd unexpectedly uses multiple illusionary clones. Guise can't tell which one is real and lets himself get hit. But in an instant, he realizes the real Lloyd is the one whose sword isn't made of earth, and he strikes immediately. Guise praises Lloyd for attempting a physical attack, knowing magical attacks don't work against him. Still, he laughs as he says even physical blows won't hurt him because no matter what damage Lloyd causes, Guise can regenerate instantly. He can also harden his body to be as tough as iron. And he deliberately let Lloyd stab him just to identify the real one. Guise says Lloyd can be proud of himself in the afterlife since he managed to, but his villain monologue doesn't go too well because Lloyd's clones haven't vanished yet. And now Guise is shocked to see that the Lloyd he attacked was also a fake. Meaning Lloyd gave a real sword to a clone to deceive him. Guise tries to guess where the real Lloyd is. He suspects he's hiding in the sky, but he's completely wrong. The real Lloyd attacks from behind. Just when he thinks his plan is working, Guise disagrees, regenerating instantly. He teleports some clothes onto his body, and we learn more about his powers. Guise can teleport objects without seeing them, but only if he knows exactly where they are. Lloyd explains that his clones are practically useless, meant only for silly tricks. There are many ways this could go wrong for him, which makes his plan extremely risky. Grimm is terrified, and Guise chooses a simpler approach. He'll attack all of Lloyd's clones at once. This strike should reveal the real Lloyd since Guise is sure he'd use a barrier to protect his actual body. However, that also turns out to be another clever trick. So, Guise continues his assault. He tries to understand what Lloyd is planning. Suddenly, he becomes excited as he realizes this fight is way more thrilling than facing entire demon legions. He's convinced that Lloyd is enjoying himself too. So, he summons even more clones. In the shadows, Grimm is horrified as he understands Lloyd's plan. He knew that Guise would attack the clones, thinking Lloyd would shield his real body with a barrier. So Lloyd decided not to use any barrier at all. Instead, he's using an obscure technique to hide his presence, doing everything he can to avoid being struck by the spears. It's incredibly dangerous, and Grimm wonders what could possibly justify such a reckless strategy. Going back a bit in time, we discover what's so special about the sword Lloyd is using. It has a magical inscription that allows it to absorb spells. The wielder can either absorb the spell to increase their own mana or to analyze it. Back in the present,
Grim realizes that Lloyd is trying to decipher the incantation required to use the Shadow Wolf technique. That teleportation spell Jade spent his entire life trying to understand without success. Trying to do something like that in the middle of such a dangerous battle is completely reckless. Human even. So Grim begs Lloyd to give up and run, but he quickly realizes that Lloyd would never run away from an unknown spell. Lloyd is simply a maniac when it comes to magic. So Grim changes his stance and starts hoping that Lloyd will actually be able to defeat Guys. Lloyd uses the spell tracker technique to analyze the magic and searches for traces of Jade within it. He tries calling out to Jade, telling him that all his friends are waiting for him. Lloyd reveals himself to Guys, who suddenly realizes he's not protected by a barrier. He notices a cut on his cheek. Lloyd explains that he noticed something important, which is why he stopped using clones altogether. Guys assumes that Lloyd realized he can't win this fight and demands to know why he's still fighting. He acknowledges that Lloyd is different from everyone else and says that the two of them are alike. Guys tries to convince Lloyd to join him, but he is immediately rejected. Lloyd admits that Guys is indeed strong, but he emphasizes that strength is all he has. Humans, on the other hand, are weak and they spend their whole lives trying to overcome their limits, but that's exactly what makes them capable of creating amazing things. Magic is the perfect example of that. It was born from people's desire to control elements like fire or flight. Every spell ever crafted is deeply rooted in the dreams of its creator. That's why sorcery is endlessly fascinating to Lloyd. But Guys doesn't care about any of that. He just wants to end the fight quickly. The problem is that Lloyd completely overwhelms him. The pain is unbelievable and Lloyd explains that this was a strike using only essential core techniques. Guys has no idea what that even means. But he's even more shocked when he realizes that Lloyd predicted exactly where he would teleport in order to land the blow. Lloyd says he's grown tired of Guy's repetitive attacks and taunts him, daring him to stop wasting time and use something new that infuriates Guys. How dare a human give orders to a demon like Lloyd, but then Lloyd mentions Jade's last words. Guys doesn't take it seriously at first, but Lloyd explains that Jade said Guys would lose. That enrages Guys even more, but before he can react, Lloyd simply throws him into the air. Lloyd's assault is brutal. And though Guys tries to stay composed amidst the screams of pain, the truth is that Lloyd's strikes hurt badly. Still, Guys remembers that he can just regenerate, and that should bring him some relief, right? But he's wrong. There's an even bigger problem. Lloyd keeps dominating the fight completely, not giving Guys even a second to recover. Lloyd uses a double launch technique to prepare his next strike. The impact sends Guys flying toward the castle and before he can even stabilize himself, Lloyd is already on top of him again. Guys panics as he sees magma directly beneath him, but he can't figure out exactly where he is. Falling into the magma would be catastrophic, so he tries to find a path through line of sight to escape. But Lloyd was already one step ahead and delivers another devastating attack. In that moment, Lloyd reflects on his passion for magic, something that has always fascinated him both in this life and the last. He's always been curious about the people behind spells, how they were crafted, and now he feels that same curiosity about Jade. Guys is in unbearable pain, and Lloyd declares that this fight has been extremely boring for him. With no more options left, Guys begins preparing his final attack and reveals what truly separates a basic demon from a Lloyd-class demon. The ability to freely manipulate atmospheric mana by concentrating all the mana in the area. Guys creates an attack capable of reducing anything to nothingness. Its name is Black Sphere of Mao, and this spell is absolutely terrifying, but Lloyd makes it vanish effortlessly. Guys falls into despair as he searches for his missing Black Sphere. Completely unable to understand what happened, Lloyd calmly explains that he simply erased the attack using a similar technique. Guys refuses to believe that's even possible. But Lloyd reveals the name of his spell, Void. That spell can launch the target into another dimension and pulverize it completely. Lloyd says he learned that spell a long time ago and only now realized that it operates under the exact same principle as Guy's black sphere. And like any true lover of magic, he was curious to see what would happen if the two techniques collided. So he simply made them clash. Guy's is left utterly unhinged. Creating a single black sphere already requires an absurd amount of mana, and Lloyd had conjured two just to test them. But to Lloyd's surprise, when the two collided, they simply cancelled each other out. That was quite disappointing. And now he's equally disappointed with Guy's because this battle has already lost all meaning. Guy's, on the other hand, is boiling with rage, while Lloyd doesn't even pay attention to his furious speech. Guy's tries to attack once more, but the moment he touches Lloyd, he's overwhelmed by an absolute fear. Even Grimm, who believed he understood Lloyd's power, realizes he was completely mistaken. Lloyd is on an entirely different level. From Lloyd's perspective, Guy's only has one more use, to serve as the target of yet another magical experiment. He wants to see what happens. When Guy's is struck simply by the void, Guy's is consumed by immense dread as Lloyd delivers the final blow. Meanwhile, as Sylph was fighting the demons, something strange begins to happen. They start moving slowly, very slowly. There's also a sweet aroma in the air, and Ren seems to say not to breathe in too deeply. It's her poison, and she's doing everything she can to keep it from reaching her friends. Albert thinks the fight would go better if the sun rose, and he realizes the sun should have already appeared. They assume it's all a mist, but soon notice that dark clouds are covering the sky. Guy screams in agony, the damage being too great for him to regenerate, and his shadow wolf is not functioning either. So he decides to abandon Jade's body. However, there's no escaping the void. Guy's then pretends to be the real Jade. He claims the void removed Guy's from his body and begs Lloyd to stop the attack. He pleads for the other assassins to attack Lloyd in his place. Lloyd knows exactly what to do and crushes Guy's. Grimm simply sighs as Jade's spirit lingers for a moment before vanishing. Ram looks up at the sky and remembers that Jade once told them about a rumor concerning the seventh prince. The newspapers claimed there had been a firework accident on the day of his birth. But the rumors suggested it may have been a spell cast by the seventh prince at the moment of his birth. The other assassins believed this. They thought that if the rumors were true, then a prodigy like the seventh prince could free them from their curses. They all had a friendly discussion, and the big guy offered to serve the seventh prince for the rest of his life if he could save them. Ren smiles uncontrollably as she remembers how Jade wanted them all to live freely together. After the battle, Lloyd builds a grave for Jade, but Grimm points out how distant the grave is compared to the others. Lloyd explains that the void consumes everything and that there was no body left to bury, so this is more of a memorial. Grimm is impressed that Lloyd managed to strike the void since it moves so slowly. Lloyd then explains that he only succeeded because he deciphered Guy's shadow wolf spell. He created a spell to detect when it was being used and linked it to his reflexes so he could dodge and pursue automatically. Grimm can't believe Lloyd managed to break down such a complex spell in the middle of an intense battle, but Lloyd admits that he was being very cautious and Guy's was incredibly powerful. Lloyd was fortunate because the shadow wolf spell had been clearly exposed to him. That's because in the end, Jade managed to transcribe the full spell for the shadow wolf and left it behind, knowing that someone would take on the challenge of finding a way to defeat it. Lloyd declares that it wasn't he who won this fight, but Jade. Ree listens beside him, and his words move her deeply. She wants Lloyd to know just how grateful she is, but Albert arrives to speak with him. Lloyd tries to hide whom the grave is for, but Albert already knows it belongs to the leader of the Assassin Guild. However, Albert doesn't know the full story, so Lloyd realizes the assassins must have made up a version to protect their secret. Albert still knows that Lloyd defeated a demon, so he feels proud of his little brother's strength and kindness. Unfortunately, life is complicated and the Assassin Guild must be taken into custody. Ray expects the same fate once she is found.
The assassins committed very serious crimes in the past. And now they've simply taken the prince and forced him into the war.
Still, they promise to make amends by serving Lloyd for the rest of their lives.
They're determined to fix what they've broken. And Albert feels they don't need to be restrained. At that moment, everyone is shocked. When Albert points his sword at Lloyd and says the situation is very serious, he says this won't be like having a pet if the assassins become his servants and commit a terrible act. Lloyd will be held responsible. The assassins begin to fear that Lloyd might not want them, but Lloyd decides that he will take full responsibility for them.
Lloyd is certain that this is truly what he wants.
Everyone is surprised when a gust of wind blows at that exact moment. Albert wants to make sure that Lloyd understands that people truly care about him. So, he tells him not to keep his distance so much.
He promises to always be by Lloyd's side whenever he needs him.
And for that reason, he wants Lloyd to ask for help more often.
More important than being a prince, Lloyd is his brother above anything else.
And Albert tells Lloyd just how much he loves him. And everyone watches the beautiful moment unfold. Right then, Tao appears out of nowhere, asking if Lloyd and Albert are okay. She ran there the moment she heard Lloyd was in trouble and told everyone not to worry anymore because she was finally there. However, she realizes that the battle has already ended. Judging by the grave and the empty look on everyone's faces, Tao runs away embarrassed. But the others go after her to thank her for what she did the other day. Grimm is surprised to see that Lloyd genuinely wants the assassins to be his mentors. Lloyd tries to say he's only interested in their parties, but Grimm notices it's something more than that. Sometime later, a tea party is held, but Tao is extremely nervous due to all the royalty present. Albert assures her that she can relax, but Tao ends up getting a bit too comfortable and makes a mistake when she calls Sela a stupid maid and orders her to serve tea. The two begin to argue and the assassins say they enjoy lively parties like this. Some of the party guests drink a bit too much and end up holding a farewell toast to Jade. Dahlia wants Albert to have a drink, but he points out that he's conducting official business by keeping an eye on the assassins. However, Talia insists and uses her ability to share her drink with Albert. Everyone is shocked to see that she actually did it and wonder what might happen next.
Albert becomes furious when he remembers that the assassins never explain why they were wearing Lloyd's clothes.
Everyone is enjoying themselves, but they suddenly notice that Sela is nowhere to be seen. That's because the girls have returned to the castle and are enjoying the hot steaming water like a proper bath. Ren says she wants to work for Lloyd just like Sela, but Sela tells her that she needs to ask Lloyd directly. Ren is surprised when Lloyd shows up right there and allows her to stay by his side. Sela explains that she dragged Lloyd into the bath because he was filthy and covered in dirt. She stops Lloyd from slipping away quietly, and Ren questions whether it would really be right for her to stay by Lloyd's side. After all, she has hurt many people in the past, and to make matters worse, she's poisonous. Ren is shocked when Lloyd bluntly tells her that she still has a lot to improve and that she should start by no longer calling herself a blighter. He explains that if she learns to truly understand her ability, she could become a pharmacist or create medicine. Ren finds it hard to believe she could actually help people with her skill, and Lloyd says he needs to study her more. Ren's mind fills with memories of all the people who hated her because of her poison, of how she even hated herself. But Lloyd accepted her without hesitation, and only now does she realize that Lloyd never once called her a failure. Lloyd advises her to work hard before he leaves, and Ren promises she'll give it her all. Later on, everyone gets ready to meet with the king, and Lloyd fears he might be in trouble, but the king is actually very proud of his sons. Meanwhile, in the basement, Ren is doing some cleaning and feels happy to see that Lloyd is doing what he loves the most, which is learning about magic. And that's where our video ends. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. And leave a comment down below saying, "I love magic." So we'll know you watched it all the way to the end. Take care and see you next.